So I really like the Ninja Turtles. And I gotta say, they could not have picked a better time to release a new Ninja Turtles movie. I mean, we had the epic Last Ronin story and its sequel just completed. The DLC Dimension Shell Shock for the very popular Shredder's Revenge game coming out at the end of the month. Not to mention the COWABUNGA collection that just came out last summer. Just 13 of the best TMNT games from back in the day. I got physical copies of them both. I don't care that we're living in a digital landscape. These are cool, I'm extra as hell, and they look good on my shelf. Seriously, it seems like since the 2012 show, we've had nothing but just banger after banger involving the TMNT. So the fact that we're finally getting another theatrically released movie is a pretty big deal. Now, before I get into the review, I want to throw out a real quick disclaimer. I adore every iteration of the Turtles. Literally. The 87 series, the 2003 series, the 2012 series, Rise of the TMNT. Loved them all. That includes comic book runs. I like the comic book runs. These right here are just the ones that I have in trades. Like, I've got a whole stack of the regular floppy comics upstairs. So know that I am a little biased because I do love the TMNT. That said, I also want to say that the TMNT movies haven't always been the bangers that the rest of the media has. The first movie, that's a classic. That's an undisputable fact. The second movie isn't bad. The third movie is bad, but it's at least campy fun if you're, I don't know, drunk. Then we don't get another movie until 2007 with TMNT, which isn't bad. It's just very mid. Like, it's pretty boring. Also, Mikey and Donnie are just kind of there in that movie. It's mostly a Raph and Leo film. Then, of course, we had the 2014 and 2016 films produced by Michael Bay. Those are movies that happened. They're not awful. The first half of the first one is, but they're not bad. There are parts that I like about both films, but there are still things that I don't like about either one of them. Some of the humor, some of the visuals. Why did the Turtles look like Shrek had a baby with the trolls from Lord of the Rings, man?
What are you doing in my swamp?
Whatever, I digress. We needed a win, okay? We've had more bad and or mid movies than we have good movies. If you're keeping track, theatrically released films, we've had one that was good. Now, we've also had a direct-to-DVD and a direct-to-streaming movie. On DVD, we got Batman vs. the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that movie was a fucking banger. For the people that like the darker, more intense version of the Turtles, it's definitely something you should watch. It's a good movie, and it's a more adult take of the characters without being, you know, stupid gritty. And then on Netflix, we got the Rise of the TMNT film. The movie takes place after the series, and you don't necessarily have to watch the series to understand the film, so it's a pretty easy watch, honestly. Okay, that's enough rambling. Let's talk about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Mutant Mayhem was produced by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. You know those guys, they produce a lot of movies. And it was directed by Jeff Rowe, the guy who directed The Mitchells vs. the Machines. It had an enormously star-studded cast, and so off the bat, my expectations were higher than I wanted them to be. One of the big noticeable differences that a lot of people are going to be talking about in this one versus other iterations of the Turtles is that the Turtles are voiced by actual teenagers. Each of the actors they got are from other things, but I don't know most of them from most things. I know that the kid voicing Leo is also Gumball on that show on Cartoon Network, but I don't really recognize the other three from anything that I've actually seen. That said, I think they all did a wonderful job. So there's a lot to jump into with this film, so I want to break this down in a way that is concrete and a little bit more organized, because my brain is a mess. So we're going to start with visuals, then we're going to jump into characters, then we're going to jump into story, and then we'll kind of do like a final thoughts, anything that didn't fit into those three categories. Kicking it off with the visuals, the first thing I want to talk about are these backgrounds. From what I've read, it was supposed to evoke the feelings of something you'd see drawn in a high school notebook. And honestly, not only do I see that, it's pretty awesome. These backgrounds stood out in every scene that they were in, and I don't think that people are appreciating them enough. I've heard lots of people talking about how much they love them, but honestly, even that, I need more. They're so good. The aesthetic was so punk rock. It reminded me of like underground comics, which is fair because literally the TMNT was an underground comic. I love that the art has the same feelings. It evokes the same feelings that you'd get looking at some of the classic pages without being a one-to-one copy. This art style is so different from the art style of the original comics, but both of them look so hand-drawn. They look so lovingly made, and that's something that I think is hard to replicate. It's so cool. The use of CG here to kind of blend 2D and 3D animation, and you can see just looking at the difference between the characters and the backgrounds, the amount of inspiration that came from like Spider-Verse, or even from the Mitchells versus the Machines. And you know what? Puss in Boots 2 even. This is such an interesting style that we're getting more and more, and I'm really excited to see more of. One of the first things you'll find people complaining about with this movie are the character designs. A lot of people hate the way that they look. They don't like the way that they stand out against the backgrounds. People are complaining about how ugly all the people look. A number of people were saying that a lot of the characters looked like rejects from a claymation film. And I have to say that that's such a weird dig at the film, because I don't know how someone can be so bold and on the verge of being correct, but at the same time be so massively wrong. Because here's the thing, they do remind me of something from a stop motion film. There are a lot of scenes where all of the characters look like they came from a stop motion film, a very well-made stop motion film. These character designs though, how ugly they look, they remind me of like Paranorman, a for kids horror comedy stop motion film, but also of 90s and early 2000s Nickelodeon. You look at these people, their weird designs, their weird shapes, and it immediately, to me, sparks memories of like Class B Soup. Those guys. All of the characters in this look like someone that you could see in an episode of The Rugrats or an episode of All Real Monsters. Also, while I'm thinking about it, it kind of has some of those feelings of like Ed, Edd n Eddy characters too. So if you grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s like I did, these character designs should be evoking nostalgia, at least at some capacity, I would think. Another thing in the animation that I think more people need to talk about is the few moments where we get some really good fight choreography. There are some amazing fight choreography moments throughout the film, and some of the best ones are near the end in a scene that I will not be talking about. Believe me, you'll know it when you see it, but it's phenomenal. Also, the amount of background details, like just the little things they snuck in there. Got the Gojo sticker on Donnie's staff. That's dope. The fact that April goes to Eastman High. The fact that there's a place called The Laird. We just got so many little background details, little references to other TMNT things. And I think that's great. That's awesome. Now, the elephant in the room is April looks very different in this film than a lot of her other iterations. But I hate to break it to the people that complained about that. She looks different in every iteration. And yeah, no, I know what the thing is that they're actually complaining about. And a lot of people are complaining about it. There are so many channels that are just using April's new design as clickbait to try to hate bait people into watching shit. It's despicable. It's absolutely despicable. I watched maybe 2 of these to try to see if they had any actual valid reasoning, like if they had any argument beyond the surface level. They didn't. Every one of them complained about the same 3 things. Some of them made shit up just to try to get more people to click on their video.
That's, well, a bit cringe in it, Link.
It wasn't worth my time, and it isn't worth your time. I've met people that don't like April's new design because they didn't like any of the designs. They didn't like that ugly aesthetic, and I think that's a perfectly valid thing. This isn't a design that's supposed to appeal to everyone. It was supposed to be something different. It was supposed to kind of be doing its own thing. It wanted to look specifically separate from every other iteration of the Turtles, and I think they did a really good job. So did a lot of other people. And if that aesthetic isn't for you, that's totally valid, but the amount of people that are just acting like April is the problem, that's what's throwing me off, man. Like, look, this isn't our first Black April. The last time that we got an African-American April was in Rise of the TMNT, and a lot of people were complaining about the change, of course. And when you'd point out, is it because her skin color changed? They'd say, no, it has nothing to do with that. They didn't have her hair's not red anymore. It's supposed to be red, which is funny considering Megan Fox's hair wasn't red. But you know what? This April has red hair. So you can't use that fallback excuse anymore. Sorry, dude. Whatever. I'm not going to indulge in the amount of toxic discussion that's going on about it. just know that a lot of the things people are saying about April aren't even founded on anything. They're just shouting out their ass and they haven't seen the movie. I'm not here to cause drama. I don't usually call names, but those people are dumb, man. Don't indulge them. So jumping over into characters, let's start with the Turtles. Now Leo in this one is definitely different than how we've seen him in a lot of other iterations. But at the same time, I think he's a perfect blend of the attempting to be a leader, but he's still kind of a dork version in 2012. And you kind of combine that with the Rise of the TMNT version where he's full of himself, but he's using it to cover up his imposter syndrome. Leo desperately wants to look cool in front of his brothers. He really wants the respect of his brothers. He wants to feel like the leader. One thing that I'm glad they didn't really do was that storyline where Raph wants to be the leader and it turns into a bit of a rivalry. Sometimes they fight. It's a classic part of the lore, but it's so done at this point that I really just, it doesn't need to be there. And maybe we'll eventually get to that as these iterations grow up, but you know, we didn't need it for the first movie. It's fine. So that segues nicely into Raph. Raph in this one, again, feels like a combination of some of his other iterations. To me, it reminds me of a very toned down version of Raph from Rise. Raph from Rise was pretty full of himself. He really loved to just smash, bash, and fight, but he was a fun guy. He wasn't as mad at his brothers. You don't see that older brother bully aspect of Raph in Rise. Instead, he's kind of just supportive of his brothers, and that's very similar to the Raph we get in this movie. They make a few jokes about Raph having anger problems, needing to see therapy, and they are funny jokes, but they also don't quite fit because this version of Raph isn't super angry for the most part. He revels in fighting. It's something that he dreams about every night. It's something that he wants to do, but he's not an angry guy. He's just hyperactive and wants to throw some punches. Donnie is another character that had quite a few changes in this one. He doesn't build a lot of gadgets, but he is really into tech. Mostly, he's a computer nerd. So it's, to me, the beginnings of what will eventually become our gadget-making smart guy. Yeah, for once, Donnie doesn't do machines. He is a weeb, though. Donnie references Attack on Titan, wears a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure hoodie, and like I mentioned earlier, has a Gojo sticker on his post half. So, yeah, Donnie's a full weeb. Which is kind of dope. Kind of shows how mainstream anime is getting that we're getting anime references in a Ninja Turtle movie. Hell yeah. The character who really had the least amount of changes to him is my favorite turtle, Michelangelo. Mikey is, as always, the fun-loving heart of the team. He is just the dude that wants to do fun stuff. He loves his nunchucks, he likes making jokes. This version of Mikey wants to be an improv comedian, which is a take, you know. He's got that class clown energy that all Mikeys have, so honestly, it makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I didn't love about Mikey is the same thing that I didn't love about Mikey in Rise. And that's when all of the turtles are fairly comedic, when all of the turtles are kind of being fun, it kind of takes away some of Mikey's role to me. Now, Rise did a good job with leaning into Mikey being the heart of the team. Not as often as I'd like them to, but, you know, it did it, and that's what's important. This movie didn't really do that. I wish they could have leaned more into Mikey. We could have got some heartfelt Mikey speeches. I think that would have been cool. Because when it comes down to it, Mikey isn't just the party dude. Yes, he's goofy. Yes, he's fun. Yes, he's the most obsessed with pizza. But he also has the biggest heart. Mikey's the one that loves the outside world the most. Mikey's the one that loves everyone around him the most. Mikey is goofy and fun and happy because he wants everyone to be goofy, fun, and happy. And I really liked this iteration of Mikey, and of the 4 voice actors, I think Mikey was my favorite. I'm biased, I'll admit it. I just wish they would have leaned more into that aspect of him. That said, still a phenomenal depiction. So from the boys, we're going to move on to Splinter. Splinter in this one is completely different than every other version we've seen of him. The boys still had some part of their other iterations. Splinter did not. Mostly, I'll get to that. We've seen Splinter before as just a wise sensei. We've seen him as a loving father, wise sensei who is terrifying and awesome. And we've seen him as a lazy couch potato who is a secret badass. But in this one, we get quite a bit of a change, and a lot of it's to his backstory. The only parts of his backstory that we really see is that when he was a rat, other rats didn't like him, other animals didn't like him, people hated him. Obviously, people generally don't like rats. Splinter basically had no friends, except for a cockroach named Kevin that was stepped on and then that he ate. F's in the chat for Kevin. He was a real one. The first creatures he really found that didn't want to kill him were the turtles. Because of that, he wanted to protect them. So when they all mutated into humanoid creatures, he became more of a loving, protective father. At one point, he tries to take the turtles up to the surface. It doesn't go so well. He decides humans are scary. We won't go back up there. And his main role in this one is just being kind of overprotective. He decides to use old kung fu movies and how-to videos on YouTube to teach his sons ninjutsu so that they have some way to protect themselves. That's a part that I think will definitely throw a lot of old school fans off. It's very reminiscent of the fact that they just found a How to Be a Ninja book in the sewers in the Bay movie, but I think this one's slightly more realistic. Now that said, we don't get a lot of his other backstory, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later, but I think there's more to Splinter than what really meets the eye. So now we'll talk about April. Instead of her character design, like I had to go on about earlier, wouldn't have had to go on about it if so many people weren't assholes. April in this one is very chill. She makes friends with the turtles while investigating some leads on crime sprees that have been going on throughout town, because this April, like many of our other ones, wants to be a journalist. On a side note, I like journalist April, but I'm really hoping we get to see scientist April again soon, because I love that aspect. Anyway, April's characterization in the film is pretty good. She does have a few fairly funny moments, and generally when she's on screen, it's a good time. Zero complaints about Mutant Mayhem April. I think she's great. Superfly is absolutely terrifying. Ice Cube did such a good job. This was a scary villain, as far as kids' movies go. Mondo Gecko reminded me a lot of his 2012 iteration. Just a fun dude that likes to skateboard. You know, Mondo Gecko is Mondo Gecko. There's no change there. Bebop and Rocksteady did a good job being big, dumb, angry guys. Wingnut didn't get a lot of screen time. She was pretty good. The biggest difference between this Wingnut and other iterations that we've seen is this one's a lot smaller. This one's a girl. There's no Screw Loose yet. Maybe we'll get a Screw Loose later. Leatherhead is no longer an alligator. Leatherhead is now a crocodile. Leatherhead was Leatherhead. We didn't really dive into her character a whole lot. Ray Fillet, instead of being a superhero, is, well, look, I like Ray Fillet, and I think Post Malone did a good job, but I got so sick of this character by the end of the movie. This isn't a spoiler. One of the big things that Ray Fillet does is sing his own name. He sings his own name a lot. Ray Fillet wants to be a singer, which is fine. I'm okay with some kind of character motivation for some of these characters. I think that's fun. We got more information about Ray Fillet than we did for a lot of the other mutants, so it's nice that we had something. And Post Malone has a really nice voice, so like they're gonna let him sing. They let Jack Black sing when he was Bowser, but I was so tired of hearing Ray Fillet sing his name, because the one thing he sings over and over is just Ray Fillet. He just sings his name. We didn't get a lot of Baxter Stockman in this movie, but I think we're going to get more of him later. They wouldn't get Giancarlo Esposito if they were only going to use him for like a scene. That feels like a waste of a good actor. One character that got a lot of screen time but is just super mysterious is Cynthia Utram. One thing I noticed is that to me it sounded like her accent kept changing. And I think that's something that some people would complain about, but I think they're trying to hint at her not being, you know, all there. They're trying to hint at her not being a regular ass person. Look, I'm spitballing here. This isn't a spoiler because they don't show it in this movie, but I'm pretty sure she's definitely an Utram. I mean, A, it's her last name, and B, she's super weird. We also had a couple of cameo characters. Mr. Beast apparently voiced someone in an early part of the film, and Kevin Eastman voices a human near the end of the film during the big climax. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if either of those characters got names, but it was neat. Apparently, they really wanted to find a way to get Kevin Eastman into the film, just to kind of do similar to like the Stan Lee cameos in Marvel. They wanted to have a Turtles creator somewhere in the movie. So to me, I mean, that's really cool. I wish the D&D movie had done that for literally any of the people involved with D&D. Like literally Ed Greenwood, the man who created Faerun, was not in the film. Why wasn't he in the film? I don't even think he was mentioned in the credits, man. Whatever, I'm getting off topic. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the plot. But the main plot here is that the boys want to be a part of the real world. Throughout their childhood, growing up, you know, they've had glimpses of what our world is like through the sewers. And a lot of times when they go on like grocery runs, there's a whole scene where after they get groceries, they stop by the park because there's a movie in the park and they're watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And they talk about how cool it would be to go to a human high school and for people to see them and not be afraid of them. And that's interesting because it's something that's been talked about with the Turtles before, but it's not something that's really been explored much. The second Bay movie was called Out of the Shadows, implying that the Turtles would be, out of the shadows, but at the end of the movie, they go back to the shadows. Eventually, when the Turtles are trying to record videos of them, doing their ninja skills on a roof, they end up throwing a ninja star off of the roof into the helmet of April O'Neil. While she's yelling at them, her scooter gets hijacked. The Turtles kind of kick it into high gear and decide we're going to go save that lady's scooter. Specifically because Leo gets a crush on her, which is something we haven't really seen before. It's weird. I always am not a big fan of when one of the Turtles has a crush on April. There is a really funny scene, though, where Leo's attempting to convince the other guys why they need to go do this. And while he's in the middle of his sentence, he just pulls his swords out and just runs. And they mention, I think all of his hormones kicked in at once, and it was funny. It was a good time. Or maybe I'm easily amused. I don't know. The Turtles follow these guys to a chop shop, find out that there is more than one guy in said chop shop, and it turns into a fight. The Turtles' first fight. It's mentioned quite a few times before it kicks off. It's nice because it's a very classic Ninja Turtle moment. So many iterations of the TMNT, when we finally get them fighting someone, they're constantly getting each other's way. They're constantly falling over one another because they've only trained. They've never actually fought before, especially as a unit. Fighting as a team of 4 is a lot different than practicing as a single person. I know it's random, but I think it's a really nice thing to show, especially when you're explaining to the audience that these guys are inexperienced without saying it. You're showing us that these guys know what they're doing, but at the same time don't have any clue what they're doing. And it's great. It's a really good way of showing and not telling. Something that a lot of movies don't do well. Eventually, as the fight progresses, they kind of get their stuff together and they kick the bad guys' butts. The movie uses this time to kind of reference the Ninja Rap song from Vanilla Ice. Look, I have my problems with the second movie, but that song's pretty fun. April kind of follows them to the chop shop, sees that all of the bad guys have been, knocked out. She wants to thank the guys. They're all hiding. It's in one of the trailers. It's a whole thing. She says sus a couple times. It doesn't feel forced, which is nice. A lot of times when movies have modern lingo, it just feels awful and cringy, but it actually kind of worked here, which I appreciated. The guys reveal themselves. She's shocked, but they saved her scooter. They can't be that bad. She buys them pizza, gets their whole story, and explains to them that she has been trying to hunt down Superfly, who has been committing crimes throughout New York. They decide if they can catch Superfly that people will like them. Thus starts the Turtles' adventures to save the city and find Superfly. When they meet Superfly, that's where things get interesting. When they bump into one another, Superfly is kind of amazed that there are other mutants, and they're amazed that there are a bunch of mutants. They thought that they and their dad were the only ones. And at first they kind of want to vibe with these guys, they want to hang out. Raph's having a good time with Bebop and Rocksteady. Mikey's having a good time with Mondo Gecko. But ultimately, Superfly has the idea of world domination, and it's not going to jive. The Turtles do not want to be bad guys. There's a really fun high-speed chase scene involving the Turtles and the other mutants. It's just a good time. And then from there, we get, the government interference, the Utram lady. We get the big final showdown. It's a good time. The base plot is that the Turtles want to be accepted, and they want to do this big heroic act to get accepted. Which means that from this point forward, I'm going to need to talk about spoilers. So, this is the spoiler warning. So please go to the timestamp right here if you don't want to hear anything about the movie. And I think you should do that because it's a pretty good movie. You should probably see it. So the high-speed chase ends with the Turtles crashing and getting captured by the TCRI people. Cynthia Untram wants to use their blood to make more mutagen, so she hooks them up to a machine to milk them. Yes, I said milk them. It is a running joke in the movie. April warns Splinter about what happened. Splinter goes to help them. This is the scene that has the best fight scene choreography. Splinter fights a bunch of TCRI agents, and it is so badass. It is so awesome. I wish there was more choreography like this scene in the movie. We get a little bit of it before this. We don't really get much after it. This is the coolest fight scene. There are other cool scenes, but as far as just fighting martial arts scenes, this is the best part. So the big thing that Superfly wants to do, the reason that everyone needs to stop him, is because he doesn't just want to subjugate mankind. He wants the mutants to be the main species. He's creating a machine that will mutate all of the animals. Because once all of the animals are mutants, mankind will be the lowest on the food chain, essentially. He kind of goes into some light details about the things he wants to do with humans once everyone's a mutant, and it ain't pretty. And I kind of love that because it is the exact opposite of Splinter's reaction to the world. Splinter and Superfly both raised their family of mutants. At some point, they took their mutants out into the outside world in the hopes that humans would be accepting, and they both had the same response. The difference is that Splinter wanted to protect his boys, so they went into hiding and thought, we'll just leave the humans alone. They're violent and terrible, and they will hate us. Superfly decided to do the opposite. He fought back. He killed some humans. He wants to eradicate humanity. And the reason that I think this is great is because this movie decided to lean into this as a bad guy before introducing the Shredder. A lot of our TMNT movies start with the Shredder and the Foot because it's the most grounded and thus technically the easiest for a new audience to get used to. But this is the audience who is here to watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're not going to shy away from weirdness and stuff that's not grounded. Because teenagers who are turtle mutants and ninjas, it's not grounded, it's weird. And I think it really is nice because it shows the duality of the two things that really inspired the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You see, back in '84 when Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman came up with the TMNT, their biggest inspirations were a lot of comics that were out at the time, especially Daredevil and the New Mutants. The New Mutants being an offshoot of the X-Men. The reason that this is important is because a lot of the TMNT movies and shows, they really lean into those Daredevil elements. We get a lot of the Foot Ninjas and the Shredder and the war between the Hamato and the Oroku clans. And it's really nice. It really leans into those Daredevil aspects, but this one leans into those X-Men aspects. The fact that we've got a villain who was persecuted against and now wants to make mutants the dominant race and persecute the humans is so X-Men flavored, and it's wonderful because it's the other big inspiration. And yeah, there were other comics, but the two biggest ones were Daredevil and the X-Men. So to finally have the first movie in a franchise be leaning into the X-Men part is really cool. A thing that surprised me when all this was going on is that all of the mutants with Superfly decide that the Turtles are right, that we shouldn't subjugate all of humankind because we met some bad people. So every one of them, including series regular bad guys, Bebop and Rocksteady, joined the Turtles to fight Superfly, and it's kind of a neat scene. It's all thanks to Splinter kind of giving a big speech about how he was wrong, they shouldn't hide from humanity, they're going to go save everyone, and they are going to be accepted. Splinter has this big character moment, and now we're going to go beat that bad guy. It's intense, it's a good time. Eventually they do. They save the day. Everyone claps and cheers on the mutants. And the Turtles end up going to human high school, something that we've never seen them do before. And again, I'm sure someone will complain about that. Someone will be like, oh, that's not how the Turtles are... Whatever. We're getting something new. We're getting something we haven't seen before. Let's give it a chance before we shit on it. Yeah? In the after credit scene, we see that Cynthia Utrom has captured the fly that was Superfly. She is still planning on capturing the Turtles as well as the other mutants, and she has her men call the Shredder. We get like a zoom out of New York City and we see the Shredder silhouette, and it's really intense. It brings a lot of questions, like when the Shredder shows up, are we going to get any more answers about Splinter's backstory? Like I said before, Splinter really just says that he didn't get along with other rats out in the wild. So a lot of people, myself included, are speculating that Splinter maybe was owned by Hamato Yoshi, like he was in other iterations of the Turtles, like the original comic, the 2003 series, the 90s movie. The fact that wild rats didn't like him kind of makes me think that he might be domesticated. Part of his distrust of humans could be that the only good human he knows got murdered. So maybe when the Shredder shows up, we'll finally get some of those elements. I don't know for sure. Like I said, this is all speculation. I also want to know if somehow the Shredder's going to convince Bebop and Rocksteady to join him, so they'll be villains again. I don't know. Maybe we'll just get heroic Bebop and Rocksteady, but there's no guarantee. I don't know. They've been regular bad guys since 1987, so I don't see them staying as heroes, but it's possible. Okay, so final thoughts and things that didn't quite fit into the other categories. The soundtrack here is great. We got like this compilation of 90s New York hip hop, and it fit the aesthetic and everything going on so well, man. If they release it, I'll probably buy it. All of the voice acting here was just phenomenal. It was really, really well done. The four boys got to record a lot of their lines in the same room, which is really nice. They do a bit of that humor where everyone's trying to talk over each other, but it doesn't feel, annoying. It feels like a bunch of brothers. Anyone who comes from a background of having like siblings or even like cousins that were close, you could probably relate to a lot of the situations happening between the turtles. And I think a lot of that chemistry and a lot of how well they were able to bounce off of one another had a lot to do with the fact that they were recording in the same room. And honestly, this goes to all the rest of the actors too. There wasn't a single actor in this movie that did a bad job. Seth Rogen, who usually does nothing for his voice, even put a little bit of a New York accent on his voice for Bebop. No, it's not much, but it's something. Yeah, I really only had a few complaints about the movie, and I think a lot of them I've already kind of voiced. We got a decent amount of screen time from all four turtles, and that's already more than I can say about a lot of the films that we've had. There are a number of people that will defend the 2007 movie to their grave, but the 2007 movie barely features Donnie or Mikey. I said it before, and yeah, I wish they'd done a little bit more with Michelangelo, but they still had Mikey in a lot of scenes. Mikey felt like an actual main character of the movie, unlike Mikey in the 2007 film. The only thing that movie has on this one is Chris Evans as Casey Jones. And the only reason that it even technically gets that as a win is because this movie doesn't have Casey Jones. He's not here yet. When I was writing down my notes in the theater, one of the things that I wrote down was that I was sick of seeing the Pizza Hut logo on every pizza box in the film. I mean, they live in New York City. That's like the home of the best pizza. There are so many good pizza places throughout New York. Why would they go to Pizza Hut? But I can't really say that as much of a complaint because, I mean, they've been branding themselves with Pizza Hut for a long time. The OG TMNT arcade game, when it finally got released onto the NES, came with a coupon for a free personal pan pizza. So, I mean, the Pizza Hut sponsorships aren't new. That's something that's been around since early parts of the franchise. When they established their love of pizza, one of the larger pizza chains made sure to get up on that. So, I want to complain about that, but it's a thing. Interestingly enough, the 1990s film had them eating Domino's, which Domino's sucked back then. Ultimately, I really liked this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was an interesting take on the franchise and on the characters. The hype for me was pretty real, so I was going to be really bummed if it sucked. But luckily, it didn't. And if it really isn't your thing, just watch some of the older versions, man. They're all still there. In fact, they're all super easy to watch now because not only are most of them currently on Paramount Plus, but all of them have been released on DVD and Blu-ray at this point. I don't know if all of them have been released on Blu-ray, but they're all at least on DVD. Plus, Viacom just got the rights to the original 80s series, so we should be seeing that on Paramount Plus soon too. That said, if you do like this one, it is here to stay for quite a while. We've not only got a sequel coming, but we've got 2 seasons of a Paramount Plus show coming. I, for one, am super excited. Anytime something new happens with the Turtles, I'm here for it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd really like to do more movie reviews like this. So until next time, I'll catch you guys later. Cowabunga, dude.